Hello, good night, everyone. Today's session will be based on the chapter Understanding Others, which will be presented by myself, Samantha Raghunandan Singh, and Miss Karima Antoine. Before we dive into today's chapter, my colleague and I have chosen a short video in order for the class to become familiarized with today's topic. Let's have a look. Okay.
Tried wakeboarding for the first time my second year here, and I couldn't get up. I was being...
Sorry about that, sir.
No problem.
Okay. We will start off today's class by discussing what is individuality and commonality. Okay, what is individuality? It is the quality or character of a particular person or thing that distinguishes them from others of the same kind. Now, others may look the same, but may have different learning preferences, values, or personalities. This concept can be seen everywhere. Let's take a look at a group setting. For example, you will see individuals who share similar ethnic characteristics, others wearing similar symbolic symbols like you, such as a wedding ring or a piece of jewelry. You may also identify with persons who share an understanding of your ideas. This is where the theory of social identity falls into place. Does anyone know what social identity is? Okay, well, basically, it simply means who a person is in terms of the groups to which they belong to. Usually, it's defined by some physical, social, and mental characteristics of individuals. Now we will look at some challenges faced with this type of leadership. The first one being arriving at a common purpose from vast differences. Before trying to understand others, one must first understand themselves in order to create openness and connections with others. Personally speaking, as a broke 19-year-old college student, I do not fully understand myself just yet, but I am confident with what Sir had said at the beginning of the semester, that each of us will not only have a better understanding of the theory of this course, but as well as ourselves. Question for thought. How many of you here today fully understand yourself, and how did you come to that level of association? Can anyone answer this, or should we move on? Okay. Secondly, forming meaningful community and engaging in coalitions for group change. Now, as we all know, groups are normally made up of great diversity. Whether it's race, gender, learning preferences, it is always a unique blend of personality types. One must be able to adapt and see the common goal so that the group doesn't suffer from personality clashes. I'm sure most of you understand where I am coming from, whether it's work-related endeavors or even school-related. All of us has been faced with the challenges. However, by having the strength and power to go within and understand yourself and change your mindset, you are decreasing the chances of that happening. Within any group setting, I think pluralism is an important thing to remember. The pluralism of a group refers to the plethora of differences that need to be understood in order to accomplish shared purposes. Pluralistic leadership is one of the most important leadership styles, as individuals are able to fully understand and they possess the skills needed to communicate with others by coming to a common understanding. Okay. I'm aware that you guys may become easily distracted and some may even zone out due to the constant talking and length of the presentations. So I decided that instead of talking about gender diversity, we can have a look at a video. So in that way, everyone can have a better understanding of it.
Okay, so we have to get you a sword, a shield, blue pants. Oh, and I can give you the mustache I wore last Halloween. Oh, come on. So what if you didn't get the role of the princess? Being a knight is awesome. At least you're not playing a tree. Gender role stereotypes are when a person is expected to act in a certain way based on society's expectations related to their gender. Traditional gender roles go back to a time when there were clear and, at times, unequal rules about how people were expected to act based on their gender. People who were born male were expected to be strong and aggressive, not emotional, and, of course, to love sports. People who were born female were expected to be kind and nurturing, emotional, and domestic, meaning they were all supposed to be able to cook and clean. Gender role stereotypes also affect people's understanding of who is beautiful and who is not. People still go to great lengths to try and conform to these unrealistic ideals they see in popular media. They diet, obsessively exercise, and go through plastic surgery. Additionally, strict stereotypes about gender police people's emotions. Girls are not expected to show anger, and boys aren't supposed to be empathetic, nurturing, or vulnerable. Luckily, as times have changed, so have people's expectations about gender roles. More and more people are free to behave in ways that are true to who they really are, and that is a good thing.
Now we will have a look at cultural diversity, but before defining what is cultural diversity, we must first take a look at what is culture. Culture is simply what shapes us. It shapes our identity and it influences our behavior. Cultural diversity is the existence of a variety of cultural groups within a society. Cultural groups can share many different characteristics, such as race, religion, ethnicity, class, gender, etc. Effective leaders need to develop an appreciation for multiculturalism to build inclusiveness, collaboration, and common purposes. Focusing on something that is not really spoken about, race. Throughout history, individuals of different races whom are seen as inferior has been subjected to oppression and seen as non-essential. This ties in with the paradigm of privilege. Many times an individual's worthiness is based off their race. We've seen it happen in the workplace and even in television shows. This stereotype has been embedded into our psyche today. However, one must acknowledge and come to the common understanding that leaders are not born, they are made. Leaders must learn to value and recognize that leadership can take on different characteristic traits and break the generational links from this paradigm. International diversity. What is international diversity? Well, international diversity refers to diversity among the cultures of different countries. Why is it important for leaders to understand? It is important for leaders to understand as they can gain knowledge and insight into their business partners' culture. For example, let's say CEOs from two different countries make a business proposition and they have scheduled a meeting. The two countries being Trinidad and Tobago and Iran. The CEO from Iran is discussing his ideas on a chosen topic. The Trinidadian agrees and gives a thumbs up. However, the CEO from Iran sees this as disrespectful because in their culture, the thumbs up refers to an insult. But the Trinidadian didn't know this. This is where international diversity comes into play. A simple hand gesture can have a variety of meaning. This problem could have been avoided if the Trinidadian had done some research and familiarized themselves with the opposing country's culture. When working with others from different nations, realizing they may differ from you can help you understand them better and work with them more effectively. Knowledge about common Knowledge about other countries becomes increasingly important as the world becomes more connected. Some countries seem to be higher than others in different dimensions. For example, people in the US are thought to be more male dominated than people in England, but less than people in Germany. For individuals in a leadership position, it is crucial to possess the ability to hear and be open minded and inclusive of different people or different ideas. This ability to accept and work with one another strongly adds to the knowledge base of the group. Building multicultural appreciation. A leader who brings diversity to the organization requires that we know more about developing an openness and appreciation of various cultures and aspects of how others may differ. David Hoops presents an intercultural learning process model that describes how we develop and learn to communicate clearly and understand how people and cultures that seem different from our own. We will take a look at what ethnocentrism is. It simply means thinking one own group ways are superior to others, and there are transitional stages to this, being awareness, understanding, and acceptance. The first step out of ethnocentrism is where individuals are able to differentiate from the cultural differences amongst countries. Second stage is understanding. This stage involves the acquiring of knowledge and information about other cultures on a rational cognitive level, and then finally acceptance. Individuals at this stage accept other cultures without comparing or judging them against one's own culture. Here we have some benefits of a multicultural workplace. Firstly, by combining different cultures and experiences, the organization broadens understanding for consumer need. This improves the business's connection with existing clients. Secondly, by accepting everyone and their differences, they will feel more trusted and respected, and thus, strong friendships will grow. By developing their social skills, they are motivated to give more. A diverse range of employees will be attracted to work in the organization. This opens up a way to different perspectives and opportunities in the future. This encourages individual contribution and responsibility, thus giving birth to new ideas which will in turn enhance the business. And lastly, gaps are filled in the workplace. This gives the organization a competitive advantage which improves the market share. This will generate obvious growth of the business. Now I will pass you guys on to Ms. Karima Antwine, who will present the remainder of our presentation.
Hi, good night, everyone. So we'll now look at attitudes towards differences. How we view others who are different from ourselves is complex. There is some evidence that this is a developmental or sequential process during which we move from complete awareness as a child to some degree of acceptance or appreciation as a mature adult. So we learn through different positive and negative experiences. And due to these experiences, some persons learn to dislike or fear differences. And in extreme cases, fear can lead to racism, homophobia, and sexism. And in other cases, it allows us to be appreciative and embrace many differences. Now we look at the riddle scale. The Riddle scale, also known as the Riddle scale of homophobia, is a psychometric scale that measures the degree to which a person is or is not homophobic. And this scale was developed by Dorothy Riddle in 1973 and originally made to serve as a way to understand gay and lesbian attitudes. But it was later found helpful as a conceptual model for understanding other differences, as well as attitude towards people with physical disabilities or different religious practices. So the four stages of the scale, which is repulsion, pity, tolerance, and acceptance, are negative attitudes. And this is because they come from a belief that the person is different, that is different is somehow of less value than oneself. The second group of the scale, which is support, admiration, appreciation, and nurturance, are positive levels of the scale because the other person is of value just as oneself. We'll move on to the next slide. So this is just a representation of the scale and you all could see the different stages and whatnot. So we'll move on now to cultural influences on leadership and behavior. So in order to be an effective relational leader, one must gain awareness of how aspects of diversity, such as sex, race, ethnicity, age, sexual identity, and religion, may influence our own behavior and that of others in a group. So no group is totally homogeneous. We can move on to the next slide. Or in other words, no group is alike. We differ in many ways, such as personality preferences, attitudes, styles, value systems, and opinions based on our cultural influences. So now we'll move on to communication. And communication is defined as the act of giving, receiving, and sharing information. It can also be defined as transferring information from one place, person, or group to another. Each communication includes a sender, a message, and a recipient. There are different types of communication, such as verbal, nonverbal, written, visual, and listening. So if we look at a group setting, we can spot a different range of behaviors. Some individuals may be outgoing or highly verbal, and others may be more on the shy side or verbally reserved. So question, what are some ways in which we can communicate with each other? Example, eye contact. Does anybody have an idea how we could communicate? I'll take that as a no. So we'll move on to the next slide. So we communicate through physical appearance, personal space, facial expressions, gestures, touching, eye contact, expressing emotion, or time orientation. So we'll now move on to cultural assumption versus communication. Does anyone know what the term cultural assumption mean? Okay, so this basically defines what is normal or natural throughout a culture. Differences in culture can cause differences in behavior and personality, such as body language, manners, norms, which as a result can cause miscommunication. Cultural assumptions can lead persons to communicate differently. Some persons may be expressive and emotional, while others may be thoughtful, objective, and analytical. In other cases, some cultural assumptions lead individuals to be direct and factual, while others have adapted the symbolic and metaphorical approach. Some have taught to value direct and bold eye contact, while others find respect in indirect body language. Some have even learned to be timely and value promptness, while others cultures value casual approaches. And with respect to the last part that spoke about the time and promptness, I have a friend who's always late. I can't remember a time where this person reached early to anywhere we went or anywhere we, decided to go. But after meeting their family, I mean, I could understand why they were late because the family was no different. So now whenever we go out, like me and my friends, we'll always tell the person to be like ready for an hour earlier than the time, just to make sure that they reach on time. And trust me, it really does work. But anyway, having a general understanding of preferred communication patterns in a group helps the group to have a smoother interaction or relationship with each other. This also prevents persons from casting unnecessary judgment or assumptions. It is important that we treat others with the same level of respect and understanding that we desire. We'll now, another useful aspect is speech communities. We'll now move on to the other slide. And speech communities are groups of persons sharing a common language or dialect. And this exists when individuals share norms about how to use talk and what purposes it serves. It is important to remember this to prevent persons from different speech communities to not have any misunderstanding. For instance, students who are devoted players of a particular game like football have a language of their own that people who do not play the game probably would never understand. We could move to the other slide. So, how can speech communities be determined? They can be determined through different aspects such as gender, ethnicity, workplace, interests, and other groupings that share common core patterns about language and the way in which it is used. It is important to recognize and respect different speech communities as this helps to increase to understand and participate in a diverse culture. We'll now move to the other slide. Apart from that, it is important to remember the key role that nonverbal communication plays. It improves our ability to relate, engage, establish meaningful interactions in our everyday life. These nonverbal patterns reflect our values, perspective, norms, and heritage of specific culture. So now we go on to conflict resolution. This can be defined as a way in which two or more parties can find a peaceful solution to resolve a disagreement among themselves. This disagreement can be financial, personal, or even political. Sometimes a peaceful solution may not always be the method used by individuals. And this is because persons may have a range of different behaviors, while some persons may be subtle and others may be confrontational. Some individuals may even take responsibility and accountability, while others may be quick to cast blame. Sometimes some persons may even feel they are completely right and be closed off to any other options that someone else suggests in order to resolve the matter. So, how do you think you resolve situations? Are you confrontational or are you subtle? And anybody could feel free to answer at any time. Okay, we'll now move on to decision making. The way in which decisions are made can be influenced by individuals who appreciate the control of majority rule and favor voting, or those who seek the involvement of the minority views and appreciate harmony. Some persons presume that the decision should be decided by the authority, while others prefer that experienced persons on the matter or those involved should be the ones to make a decision. Relational leadership is a type of leadership that promotes unity among persons in a specific group or even in a workplace to attain the greater good or to achieve positive changes. And this requires communication skills that assist each person to seek to understand others and not just to persuade them. Next slide. Each communicator should ask themselves these questions. One, how do my perspectives and preferences shape my view? And number two, in what ways could I be understood more correctly and understand with a clearer insight? We'll now move on to leadership and communication. Almost everything we do in this life is or can be enhanced by being a more effective communicator. Communication skills involve so much more than just persuasive talking or skillful writing. For instance, a student leader once said, God gave me two ears and one mouth. I figure that's a message to listen more than I talk. This is just next slide. And here we could see a representation of the Chinese pictogram for listening, and it is made up of the symbols for ears, eyes, and the heart. And yes, this ties into the differences between hearing and listening. So we can now move to the next slide. So what is the difference between hearing and listening? Hearing happens when we identify sound and receive sound waves or vibrations through our ears. For the majority of us, this is a natural and almost automatic process. Listening happens when we hear a sound and comprehend what was heard. This requires us to be purposely mindful. Listening and communication in a pluralistic form necessitates us to listen with empathy. Listening with empathy is an intellectual and emotional participation in another person's experience. In contrast, sympathy is about feeling sorry for or sad about. So now we look at an example. So Jenny works at Grace Kennedy and has to pitch an idea for a new product to her colleagues. So while presenting her elevator pitch, she notices that some of her colleagues are snickering because she made a mistake. After the presentation, however, she confides in her friend, telling her friend about how horrible the presentation was because of the mistake she made and the reaction she received. Her friend, showing sympathy, may tell her that she is sure her presentation was not that bad and that her colleagues may have already forgotten about it. But if that friend responded in an empathic manner, she may have told her that she understands how difficult it may be to present in front of a group of persons because of her shy nature. So it must have been terrifying for her. The second response can be seen as a more genuine as opposed to the first response. And this is because the first one denied Jenny's emotions and the obvious pain from her experience. So, as we try to understand persons or others, we could learn to listen for empathy by discovering a point of agreement or genuine understanding and build on it as opposed to criticizing or rejecting the point instantly. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. We can move to the next slide. In order to do this, we must pause, think, restate, then build on the point. If we were to be honest, we could see how difficult empathic communication is. Because if we look at a simple conversation, what we say and the way in which we said it has an impact on how the receiver may interpret it. So let's look at the complexity in this verbal process. We can move to the next slide. So this verbal process is what is meant, what I actually said, what you heard me say, what you think I mean, what you mean to say, what you actually say, what I hear you say, and what I think you mean. And each element stated here is impacted by our cultural gender lenses. We'll now go on to assertive communication. Socialization has obviously had a great role in the way we have learned to communicate with each other. In communication, everyone should have equal opportunity to be heard and a responsibility to listen. Everyone should be able to make decisions for themselves without apology. Being assertive means that you did what you did to be understood. Similarly, relational leadership means that you did what you can do to ensure everyone's involvement. So let's see the difference between assertive, unassertive, and aggressive. So I want everybody to picture this scenario. Your coworker asks you to substitute for them at work tomorrow because unfortunately they cannot make it. So someone who is given an unassertive response, even though they have plans, they might deny their own rights and be intimidated into compliance. So the response might sound something like, okay, sure, I guess I can. Someone with an assertive response, this response would acknowledge that the other person had every right to ask, and you have a right to make a decision that's right for you without apology. So this response would sound something like, no, I have other plans and I cannot do it. So the aggressive response, this response denies that the other person had any right to even ask for help. Your response might sound like, "How dare you ask me to do this? You always slack off on your responsibilities, and I won't stand for it." Now think of a recent communication in which someone asked for a favor. And based on these three responses, what type of response do you think you gave? Anybody can answer if they want.
How dare you keep on asking questions like that? What is your problem?
What?
I'm giving you an example of
Also, you
negative.
caught me off guard, sorry.
So you're trying to give us a heart attack here?
And
See, you're being assertive. There you go. Very good example of that.
yes, a very good example. So now we'll move on to relational empathy. So relational understanding recognizes the importance of context. It is greater than just understanding another person. It is a norm of behavior where three relations are experienced. And these are the relation of feeling into, feeling with, and feeling for. The third relation experience can be referred to as creating a third culture that blends the positions of the other two individual perspective, culture, and context. It builds an environment of empathy and insight. The third culture can cause individuals who share different perspectives to form a sense of unity. I think we can move to the next slide. This culture states that people are honest, good, and trustworthy. People are purposeful. Each individual has a unique contribution to make, and complex problems require local solutions. The biggest difference in how a setting is viewed is the internal assumption that guide expectations. Creating this new third culture exists in the question, how am I like everyone else here? So this brings us to the end of our chapter, but let's just do a brief summary on what we covered in the chapter. We can move to the next slide. And as y'all could see, the picture says it all for us. So understanding others does not automatically mean that you must agree with how they feel or their perspective. It simply means that you identify their point of view and be okay with the idea that it may be different from yours. This can be done by understanding someone's cultural heritage, gender, and other aspects of our difference. Sometimes we even realize that we are more alike than we are different. Expecting to share the same attributes and other like purposes can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Being aware of this assists in building a new third culture in any group. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions? All right, if not, I'm gonna stop the recording.